I'd never thought it would come to this. Not in a million years. I wasn't the kind of guy who would be caught in a situation like this. I was just average. Average job, average life, average everything. But one decision, one moment, changed all of that. It wasn't like I woke up one day with a grand plan to ruin everything. No, it wasn't that dramatic. But there was a moment, a single conversation, that put everything into motion. And honestly, I didn't see it coming. Alyssa had always been the rock in our relationship. A bit distant at times, sure, but she was steady. I thought I knew her. We had our routines, our quiet, simple life. And yet, the cracks had started appearing. Slowly at first, so imperceptible that I didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. She wasn't mad at me. She wasn't angry. But something had shifted, and I couldn't put my finger on it. One evening, out of nowhere, Alyssa turned to me while I was lost in the glow of the TV screen, my usual escape. She didn't ask for anything, not right away. She didn't demand a grand gesture or an explanation. Instead, she just said it. A simple sentence, but one that cut through everything like a blade. I need you to disappear. She wasn't being cruel. It wasn't harsh. But it felt like the ground had slipped away from under me. Wait, what? I said, blinking and trying to figure out if I had heard her correctly. What do you mean by that? She didn't look at me directly. Her eyes focused on the space between us, a place where words were hanging, unspoken. Her voice was calm, but there was something in it, something I couldn't quite grasp. I need you to disappear from this, from everything, from me. I need you to go somewhere else. I need to figure things out. Not for us, for you. Just leave. I stared at her, frozen. This wasn't happening. Was she serious? What the hell was she talking about? She met my eyes finally, her face calm, detached even. You've stopped trying. I don't even know who you are anymore, Andy. You've been living in this shell, and I've been waiting for you to wake up. But you haven't. You're stuck. You're a man on autopilot, and I don't want that. I need something different, something real. My mind spun. It was like a storm had suddenly hit the most peaceful of waters. For a few moments, I didn't know what to say. I just blinked, unable to fully process the weight of her words. Why, was all I managed. She sighed. I don't know, but I think you do. You've lost yourself. I want you to find someone else. Not anyone else, but you. I can't help you do that, Andy. You need to figure it out on your own. It felt like a slap in the face, but not in the way you'd expect. There was no rage, no fury in her voice. Just a quiet resignation. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this lost. You want me to leave? I repeated, trying to make sense of this. Is that it? Just disappear? Alyssa nodded slowly. I need time. You need time. I don't want to make it harder, but I can't stand to be in this anymore. If you want me back, if we're going to ever be something again, you need to change. But not for me. For you. For the first time in years, I realized I hadn't been living for myself. I hadn't even considered the thought until that moment. My days had been filled with the same routine: work, home, sleep, repeat. I wasn't passionate anymore. I was merely existing. But what Alyssa was asking, what she was suggesting, what she wanted me to do, it wasn't just about leaving. It wasn't about me walking away to think things through. It was about disappearing from everything that had defined me. I needed to break down the walls I had built around myself, the ones I didn't even realize existed until she pointed them out. Her words hung in the air like smoke, and for a long time, I just stood there, in the thick of it. The silence felt heavy, suffocating. I couldn't understand why she was doing this to me. Why she couldn't just tell me what was wrong. Why couldn't she just fix it with me? But then I realized, this wasn't about fixing something broken. It was about rebuilding it. From scratch. Alyssa wasn't telling me she didn't love me. She wasn't telling me she was leaving. She was telling me she was giving me a choice. And I had no idea what to do with it. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall as Alyssa's words echoed in my head. Disappear. I couldn't make sense of it. Her face was unreadable, her eyes distant, almost as though she had already made up her mind about something. But I hadn't. Not yet. The silence between us felt unnatural, like a dam about to burst. I tried to process her request, but the more I thought about it, the less I understood. Leave? It felt like an impossibility. I had never been the type of person to walk away from anything. I was steady, predictable, safe, if you want to call it that. I worked my 9 to 5, came home, did the usual routine. My life had become a loop, but I had never once considered it might be suffocating me. Alyssa wasn't angry. There was no venom in her voice, no bitterness. It was just a resignation that chilled me to my core. I watched her for a moment, her hands folded neatly in her lap, avoiding my gaze, as though she had already accepted whatever was coming next. It wasn't until she spoke again that I felt my chest tighten. I don't want this to be the end of us, Andy. But I can't keep waiting for you to wake up. I can't be the only one trying. It's killing me. Her voice wavered slightly, but it wasn't sadness. It was frustration, a deep, unbearable frustration. I stood there, completely motionless. Was she asking for a separation? A break? No, it wasn't that simple. She was giving me a choice, a chance to change everything. But could I even do that? Could I really become someone else, just like that? Alyssa, I stammered, my thoughts rushing in every direction. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you expect from me. I shook my head, the confusion overwhelming me. You want me to disappear? You want me to leave? She exhaled sharply, almost like she was holding back tears. I don't want you to leave, Andy. I don't want this to be over. But if you don't change, if you don't take the leap, we're already over. I can't stay in this nothingness anymore. And I don't think you can either. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't just stuck in a rut. I wasn't just disappointing her. I was suffocating both of us, and I hadn't even realized it. I don't know if I can do this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure who I was talking to, her or myself. I don't know if I can change. Not like this. She looked up at me, her eyes clear, searching. Maybe you can't change for me, but can you change for yourself? For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at her, unsure of what to say. She wasn't asking me to be someone else entirely. She wasn't asking me to turn into a different person. She was asking me to find the part of myself I had long abandoned. The part of me that still believed in change, in possibility. But the problem was, I had buried that part so deep within me that I wasn't sure it even existed anymore. And yet, a part of me knew she was right. I had been coasting through life. Work, home, repeat. I had given up on doing anything for myself. I had let everything slip away, including her. But the realization that she was willing to walk away, that hit me hard. I couldn't lose her. I couldn't lose us. But how could I change? Where would I even begin? Alyssa stood up, her face a mix of uncertainty and determination. I'm not asking for a miracle, Andy. I'm just asking you to show me you're still in this. That you're still willing to fight. I can't carry all of this on my own anymore. She paused, waiting for me to say something, but I was silent. Then she added softly, I don't want you to disappear for good, but I need you to disappear from this, from the man you've become. The man who doesn't even know what he wants anymore. You owe it to yourself, Andy. I didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, I felt completely lost. And for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to fight her on it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I was just numb. But in that moment, I realized something deep within me had shifted. Alyssa was offering me a way out of this endless cycle. But I had to be brave enough to take it. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door, her hand resting on the doorknob. She didn't look back. I'm giving you the space you need, Andy. But don't take too long. Don't let me wait forever. I watched her leave, the weight of her words settling into my chest like a heavy stone. She wasn't leaving me. Not yet. But she was giving me an ultimatum. A choice. Change, or lose everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, her words swirling in my mind like a storm I couldn't escape. I had tried to make sense of it all, but the more I thought, the more I realized just how far I had drifted from the person I once was. Alyssa wasn't wrong. I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who was just going through the motions, living life like it didn't matter anymore. And the scariest part? I didn't know if I could ever change. Could I actually make that leap? Could I become the man she wanted me to be? The man who wasn't just surviving but living? Or was it too late? I could still hear her voice in my head, the way she said I had to disappear from this version of myself. I kept thinking about what she said, find yourself, and I hated it. I hated that it felt like she was giving up on me. But what if I had given up on myself? What if this was my last chance to actually do something about it? I dragged myself out of bed, trying to shake off the heavy feeling that had settled in my chest. It was still early, just before dawn, and the house was silent. Alyssa was still gone, off doing whatever she needed to do to figure things out. But for me, I had no idea where to start. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts, almost on autopilot. I needed someone to talk to, someone who might understand. I knew deep down that Alyssa was right. I needed a change, but it was so much bigger than I'd ever imagined. I needed to talk to someone about what was going on in my head, someone who could give me advice, or at least just listen. I called my old friend Mike. We hadn't spoken much in the last few years, but he was the one person who always seemed to have his life together. He was the kind of guy who seemed to effortlessly navigate life, always on top of everything, always so sure of himself. I envied that about him. Mike answered on the second ring. "Hey man, what's up?" I need to talk," I said, my voice shaky. "Can we meet up? Like, right now?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Is everything okay?" Mike asked, his tone a little more serious now. "I don't know, man," I said, running a hand through my hair. "I really don't know." "All right, let's meet at that diner on Main. I'll be there in 20. I hung up and grabbed my jacket. My mind was racing. What did I even need from Mike? What could he tell me that would change anything? The diner was empty when I arrived, just a few people scattered around the booths, sipping coffee and reading the paper. I slid into a booth near the back, my hands gripping the edges of the table as I waited for Mike. He was always punctual, always reliable. When he walked in, I could see that something was different. Mike was usually sharp, always dressed in button-ups and chinos, his hair neatly combed. But today, he looked tired. His eyes were bloodshot, and he had a slight stubble, like he hadn't shaved in a while. For a moment, I wondered if maybe he had his own struggles. Maybe he wasn't as perfect as I had always imagined. Mike sat down across from me, giving me a tired smile. "All right, man. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. This wasn't going to be easy. "It's Alyssa. She told me I needed to disappear." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Disappear? What does that even mean?" "I don't know, man," I muttered. "She said I've become someone I'm not. That I need to figure out who I am again. She said she needs me to change. I don't know where to start." Mike leaned back in the booth, his fingers tapping the edge of his coffee cup. "Sounds like she's giving you a wake-up call. But here's the thing, Andy, she's not going to be able to help you figure this out. You're the one who needs to make the choice. If you're stuck in this loop, then you need to break out of it." I nodded slowly, but his words felt like more pressure than comfort. "I don't even know where to begin, Mike. How do you change everything about your life when you don't even know who you are anymore?" "Start small," Mike said. "It's not about making huge, life-altering decisions overnight. It's about being honest with yourself. What have you been avoiding? What have you been hiding from? You've been living a lie for so long, you don't even know how to start living authentically." I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. He wasn't wrong. I had been running from something, but I didn't know what it was. It was like I had been scared to even try to change, scared of what that might mean. And now, Alyssa had given me an ultimatum. I either figured it out, or I lost everything. "Do you think it's too late?" I asked quietly. Mike shook his head. "It's never too late. The hardest part is starting. But once you do, everything else will follow. You've got to want it, though. You've got to make the decision for you, not for anyone else." I let his words sink in. Could I really do it? Could I change, not for Alyssa, but for me? I left the diner with a new sense of purpose, but also more confused than ever. I had no answers, no clear path, but maybe that was part of it. Maybe I didn't need all the answers right now. I needed to start. That was the only thing that mattered. The day after meeting Mike, I felt like I was walking around in a fog. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, over and over again, like a loop that wouldn't stop. The idea of change, real, honest change, was terrifying. Mike's words had been comforting, in a way, but they had also been a stark reminder of just how far I'd fallen. He was right. I hadn't been living authentically. I had been hiding from my own life, trapped in this comfortable cage I had built. And now, Alyssa was giving me the chance to break out, but only if I was brave enough to take it. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to find the courage to make the first move. Alyssa had been giving me space, like she promised, but every moment felt like a ticking clock. I knew I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I had to take action. But what action? Where did I even begin? I woke up one morning, the sunlight creeping through the blinds, and realized something. I hadn't even thought about what I wanted in all of this. It had been about Alyssa, her needs, her desires, her ultimatum. But where did I fit into this? What did I really want? And that thought scared me more than anything. Because the answer was nothing. I had no idea who I was anymore. or what I was even capable of. But as the days went on, I realized something crucial. I wasn't going to find myself by hiding away. I wasn't going to find any answers by waiting for a sign. I had to step out of the shadows, face the reality of who I had become, and start from scratch. If I wanted to change, if I wanted to prove to Alyssa that I could change, it had to start with me. And that meant facing the one thing I had been avoiding for years, my own fear. It wasn't easy. The first step was terrifying. The second was even worse. But every time I looked at Alyssa, I saw the same thing. She wasn't waiting for me to fix everything in a day. She was waiting for me to show up, to put in the work, to show her that I was worth the effort. I decided to take a week off work. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because I needed time to think, or maybe it was because I needed time to feel like I was doing something real for once. It wasn't the most logical choice, but at that point, logic had nothing to do with it. This was about finding something I had lost. I spent the first few days just walking. No destination, no plan, just walking. I wandered the city, letting my mind drift, letting the noise of the world wash over me. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't answer messages. I just existed. And in that space, something strange happened. The constant pressure that had been building in my chest, the weight of my failure, started to lift. It wasn't gone, not by a long shot, but it was lighter. I was starting to breathe again. On the fourth day, I met someone. It wasn't planned. I didn't even expect it. I was sitting in a small coffee shop, reading a book, when a woman came up to me. She was younger than me, early 30s, I'd guess. She had an easy smile, dark curly hair, and a presence that was impossible to ignore. She asked if she could sit at my table, since the place was crowded. I nodded, and we started talking. At first, it was small talk, nothing special. But as the conversation went on, something changed. She told me about her life, about how she had spent the past few years traveling, learning, experiencing new things. She was living a life of constant change. Everything was an adventure. And for some reason, I found myself captivated by her energy. Her confidence, her ability to live in the moment, was something I hadn't seen in years. It reminded me of who I used to be. The person who took risks, who wasn't afraid to dive into the unknown. She asked me about my life, and I hesitated for a moment before answering. I'm stuck, I said, feeling the weight of the truth. I've been stuck for a long time. She smiled, like she understood exactly what I meant. Yeah, I get it. Life has a way of doing that, doesn't it? But it doesn't have to stay that way. We talked for hours, and when we finally parted ways, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. A spark of possibility. She hadn't told me anything groundbreaking. She hadn't given me any advice I hadn't already heard before. But the way she lived her life, the way she spoke about it, made me believe that change was possible. As I walked back home, my mind was racing. I had been so caught up in what I thought I had to do, in all the pressure and expectations, that I had forgotten what it meant to live. Alyssa's request for me to disappear from the person I had become wasn't just a rejection. It was a chance to become someone else. Someone who wasn't afraid to live. Someone who didn't settle for nothing. When I walked through the door that evening, Alyssa was sitting on the couch, reading a book. Her face softened when she saw me. You've been gone all day, she said quietly. What did you do? I sat down next to her, feeling the weight of everything I had been carrying. I think I figured it out, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I figured out what I need to do. For me. She looked at me, waiting for me to continue. I'm not sure what that looks like yet, I said, but I know it starts with me. I need to find myself again, Alyssa, and I can't do that by staying in this comfort zone. She nodded, her eyes softening. I don't need you to be someone you're not, Andy. I just need you to be. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The next few weeks were a blur. I spent most of my time trying to rebuild myself, trying to figure out what I wanted, not just for Alyssa or anyone else, but for me. It wasn't easy. Every step felt like a struggle, like I was learning to walk again after being paralyzed for years. But somewhere along the way, I began to feel something I hadn't in a long time. Control. Not over anyone else, not over the world, but over my own life. For the first time in a long time, I was actually making decisions for myself. I started doing the things I used to enjoy, writing, sketching, going for long walks without the pressure of having to be anywhere. I even took up boxing, something I had always wanted to try but had put off because I didn't have the time, or so I thought. I began to feel like I was waking up from a dream, like I had been sleepwalking through my own existence. And it felt liberating. But the hardest part wasn't about me. It was about Alyssa. We hadn't talked much since that night when she told me to disappear. It wasn't that we were fighting or avoiding each other, but the space I had taken for myself had turned into something more. It was a wall I had built around me. And though I was changing, though I was starting to understand what it meant to live again, I didn't know how to bridge that gap with her. I didn't know how to tell her that I was finally seeing the light. I didn't know how to make her understand that this wasn't just about us. This was about me, too. Alyssa had been patient, more patient than I deserved. But the silence between us was deafening, and it was starting to wear on me. I knew that I couldn't keep hiding behind this change, this journey of self-discovery, without facing the reality of our relationship. One evening, after I returned from one of my boxing classes, Alyssa was sitting at the kitchen table, her face buried in her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her expression neutral. She didn't look upset, but she didn't look happy either. She looked distant, and that killed me. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, setting her phone down. "About everything. About us." My heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment I had been avoiding. "What have you been thinking?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wasn't angry, but she wasn't sure either. "I've been patient, Andy. I've given you the space you needed. I've waited for you to figure things out. And I know you've been trying. But I can't keep waiting forever." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I could feel the air leave my lungs, the ground beneath me shifting. I wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't prepared to hear that my time was running out. "I know," I said, my throat tight. "I don't want you to wait for me. I don't want to hold you back. But I can't. I can't keep pretending that I'm the same person I was. I can't go back to that." She nodded slowly, her eyes searching mine. "I'm not asking you to go back, Andy. I'm asking you to be present. I'm asking you to choose. To choose this. To choose me." I felt a lump form in my throat. I wasn't sure how to respond. I wasn't sure if I even had the words to explain what I was going through, what I had been through. I had changed. I had started to find myself again, but I was still lost in so many ways. "I choose you," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. But there was something behind them, something I hadn't said before, not in that way. It wasn't just a promise. It was a decision. Alyssa looked at me, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "I need you to mean it, Andy. I need you to show me that this isn't just another empty promise. I need you to fight for this, for us." Her words were a challenge, and it stung. But in a way, I understood. I had been avoiding the hardest part of this entire journey. Not the physical changes I was making, not the new habits I was forming, but the emotional and relational work. The work that would take more than just time. It would take effort. It would take honesty. It would take vulnerability. I took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling in my chest. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about my transformation. It was about us, about what we could rebuild, if we were both willing to put in the effort. "I will," I said, my voice firm now, more certain. "I'll prove it to you. I'll prove it to myself." Alyssa's expression softened, though her eyes still held that cautious hope. "I need to see it, Andy. Not just hear it. But I'm willing to try, if you are." And that was the moment when everything shifted. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew it wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time, I truly felt like I was ready. Ready to fight for her. Ready to fight for us. It wasn't just about disappearing from the life I had created. It was about disappearing from the man I used to be. Someone who was too afraid to take risks, to be vulnerable. It was about becoming someone who wasn't afraid to live. And that was the hardest part. But it was also the most important. The days that followed that conversation felt different. A subtle shift in the air, like something was finally starting to move, something that had been stuck for so long. It was hard to recognize. Alyssa and I didn't talk about it constantly, but the tension had loosened just enough for us to breathe. We both knew there was work to be done, but for the first time in what felt like ages, I wasn't afraid of it. I woke up each morning with a sense of purpose. I wasn't sure exactly where I was heading, but at least I wasn't drifting. I had started waking up earlier, started running at dawn instead of hitting snooze. I began writing again, something I hadn't done in months. There was something cathartic about putting my thoughts on paper, as if I was drawing out the chaos inside of me and making it something tangible. But all of this, everything I was doing, felt like an exercise in rebuilding myself from the ground up. I couldn't stop thinking about Alyssa. She was still waiting for me to show up, not just physically, but emotionally. I needed to show her that this wasn't just a phase, that I wasn't going to slip back into my old habits. I couldn't keep telling her I was going to change without actually doing it. One evening, about a week after that conversation, I was sitting on the couch, reading a book. Alyssa was in the kitchen, quietly chopping vegetables for dinner. I could hear the sound of the knife against the cutting board, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background. It was the kind of peaceful silence that filled the space between us, the kind that had been so familiar in the past. But this time, it didn't feel like a wall. It felt like an unspoken understanding, like we were both in the same room again. Really, truly in the same room. Alyssa, I said, setting the book down. We need to talk. She paused, looking up at me with a small smile. What about? I took a deep breath. I had been thinking about this for days. I needed to be honest. I needed to stop pretending like I had it all figured out when I didn't. I don't have all the answers. I began, my voice low. I don't know exactly where this is going, but I do know one thing. I'm in this. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And I'm going to prove it to you. Alyssa's expression softened. She set the knife down and came over to sit next to me. Andy, I don't need you to have all the answers. I just need you to be present. To show up. I will, I said more firmly this time. I promise. I will show up. Her eyes searched mine for a moment, and I could see that flicker of doubt still there, lingering. But it was quieter now. It wasn't as loud as it had been in the past. I had been avoiding this moment, the moment where I had to truly show her that I was all in. But now, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I was no longer scared of it. She leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, a gentle, almost tentative kiss, as if she was testing the waters. I know you will, she said softly. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it too. The next few days felt different. There was a change in the way we interacted. Not a dramatic, in-your-face kind of change, but a subtle one, like the air had cleared. We started spending more time together, not just as a couple, but as two people who had been through something difficult and were now beginning to find their way back to each other. We cooked together, we laughed together, and for the first time in months, we talked about things that mattered. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and the things we hadn't shared in a long time. I wasn't just talking to Alyssa about her anymore. I was talking to her about me. And for the first time, I wasn't hiding. But as things began to feel more stable between us, something else was creeping in. The realization that this wasn't just about Alyssa and me anymore. This was about me. About who I was. I had spent so much time in the past year trying to keep everything afloat, trying to be the version of myself that everyone expected, that I had forgotten who I really was underneath all of that. I had gotten so wrapped up in pleasing others, in playing the role I thought I needed to play, that I had lost track of the person I wanted to be. I started asking myself the hard questions. What did I want out of life? What kind of man did I want to become? Not just for Alyssa, not just for anyone else, but for me. It was a slow process, a painful one. I'd wake up some days and feel like I was on the right track, and other days, I'd feel completely lost again. But one thing was for sure, I wasn't running from myself anymore. I was facing the mirror and accepting the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it was. A few days later, I took a big step. I enrolled in a creative writing class, something I had always wanted to do but had put off because of fear. I started reading books that inspired me, ones I had avoided for years because I felt like I didn't have the time. I threw myself into something that felt real. Something that wasn't about being perfect or meeting someone else's expectations. It was about me. About rediscovering what I had lost. But even as I began to build myself back up, even as I began to feel like I was getting somewhere, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Alyssa wasn't the only person waiting for me to change. I was waiting for me to change. And I had no idea what that would look like. I spent nights lying awake, thinking about the future. About what it would take to make this all work. I knew Alyssa was still waiting for me to prove myself to her. But I was beginning to realize something important. The person I needed to prove it to the most was myself. That realization was both liberating and terrifying. It wasn't until one particular evening that I realized how much had changed. Alyssa and I had been spending more time together. Small moments that felt significant in a way I hadn't expected. We'd take walks in the park, cook dinner together, and talk. Really talk. About everything and nothing. It was what we had lost for so long. But we were starting to find it again, piece by piece. But there was still this nagging feeling in the back of my mind, a feeling that had grown more intense over the past few days. The more I worked on myself, the more I realized that I wasn't just trying to fix my marriage or impress Alyssa. I was doing this for me. There was no going back. I was on a path, and I couldn't afford to turn around. One night, after dinner, we sat on the couch. Alyssa was curled up next to me, and for a moment, it felt like everything was right. I felt like I had finally gotten to a place where I could breathe without feeling trapped by the weight of my own life. But as the silence stretched on, I could feel the tension creeping back in. "I've been thinking," Alyssa said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to look at her, but she kept her eyes on the floor. "I know things have been better lately, but there's something I need to ask you, Andy. Something I need to understand." I felt my heart rate spike. "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself for whatever was coming. She hesitated, taking a deep breath. "Do you think this change is real? Are you doing this because you think I want you to, or because you actually want it for yourself? Because if you're only doing this for me, I need to know." I froze, the weight of her question hitting me harder than I expected. I had spent so much time thinking about how to change, how to make things right with her, but had I really asked myself why I wanted to change in the first place? Was this truly for me? Or was I just trying to please her? I had been so focused on fixing things that I hadn't taken the time to understand why I had fallen into the rut I was in. Why had I let my life become a series of predictable, mundane moments? Why had I given up on living? I took a deep breath, my mind spinning. This was the moment I had been avoiding. The moment when I had to face the truth, not just about my marriage, but about myself. "I think I was doing it for both of us," I said slowly, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "At first, I thought I was changing because I didn't want to lose you. But now, I'm doing it because I can't keep living the way I was. I'm doing it because I need to live for myself, not just for you, not just for anyone else." She looked up at me then, her eyes searching mine, like she was looking for the truth in the words I had just spoken. For a long moment, she didn't say anything, and I could feel the weight of her gaze. "You're sure?" she asked finally, her voice soft but full of vulnerability. "Because I need to know that you're doing this for the right reasons, Andy. I can't keep waiting for you to figure it out if you don't know what you're doing." I nodded slowly, the words feeling solid now, more certain than they ever had been. "I'm sure. I'm doing this because I need to find myself again. And if you're still willing to be with me, I want you to see that I'm not just changing for you. I'm changing because I've realized that I deserve more than what I've been giving myself. I've been stuck in this shell for too long, and I can't keep living like that." Alyssa's face softened, and she reached out to take my hand. "I want that too, Andy. I don't want a man who's just going through the motions. I want someone who's truly alive, someone who isn't afraid to live again." There it was, the truth between us. I wasn't just trying to fix our relationship. I was trying to fix me. And if Alyssa could accept that, then maybe we could find our way back to each other. Not the way we had been before, but something new, something real. Over the next few weeks, things started to change even more. I kept pushing myself, not just for Alyssa, but for my own growth. I began to make decisions for me, decisions that scared me, decisions that took me out of my comfort zone. I started a blog, sharing my journey of self-discovery. It wasn't perfect, and I wasn't writing for an audience. I was writing for myself. And slowly, the more I wrote, the more I felt like I was starting to uncover the person I had buried so deep. But with each new step I took, I realized that I couldn't do it alone. I needed Alyssa, not just as my wife, but as someone who understood the journey I was on. She had been patient with me, but now I was starting to realize just how much I had neglected her in all of this. She had been waiting for me to wake up, but I had been so focused on my own transformation that I had failed to see how much she had been going through. One evening, after dinner, I found myself sitting across from her at the table, trying to figure out the words to say. There were so many things I needed to apologize for, so many moments I had taken for granted, but I didn't know where to start. "Alyssa," I said finally, my voice thick with emotion. "I've been so focused on myself, on fixing everything in my own head, that I forgot to see you, to see us. I've been selfish, and I need you to know that I'm sorry for that. I don't want to just change for me. I want to change for us." She reached out, placing her hand over mine. "I know," she said softly, "and I'm willing to wait, Andy. But I need to know you're in this, that you're really in this. Not just for me, but for you, for us." "I am," I said without hesitation. I'm in this. For us. The days that followed felt different. Lighter, in a way. It wasn't about some grand, dramatic moment where everything changed all at once, but a quiet shift that felt more like coming home to a place I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Alyssa and I had found a rhythm again, one that wasn't based on expectations or pressure, but on honesty. We had learned to communicate better, to be vulnerable with each other, and to be patient. And that made all the difference. As the weeks turned into months, I kept pushing forward in my journey of self-discovery. I wrote. I explored new hobbies. I pushed myself out of my comfort zone in ways I never thought I could. I wasn't perfect. I still had my days when I felt lost, when the old habits tried to creep back in. But the difference now was that I didn't run from it. I faced it head-on, knowing that change wasn't a one-time thing. It was a process. Alyssa and I spent more time together than we had in ages. It wasn't always perfect, and there were still moments of doubt, but we were building something stronger than what we'd had before. It wasn't about trying to return to the past. It was about creating something new, something that was uniquely ours. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to the mountains. It had been a while since we'd done something spontaneous like this, and it felt good to step away from the usual routine. We stayed in a small cabin, just the two of us, surrounded by nature. The air was crisp, the nights quiet, and it gave us the space to breathe, space to reconnect. On the second night, after a long hike, we sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun set behind the peaks. Alyssa leaned her head on my shoulder, and I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a peace that I hadn't known I was missing. "I'm proud of you, Andy," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You've come so far." I smiled, taking her hand in mine. "I couldn't have done it without you. Without your patience. Without your belief in me." She looked up at me, her eyes full of warmth. "I've always believed in you, even when you didn't believe in yourself." I squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of everything we had been through. "I'm sorry for the times I didn't show you that. I should have been more present. I should have been more there." Alyssa kissed my cheek gently, a tender smile playing on her lips. "We're here now. That's all that matters." And in that moment, everything felt right. We had weathered the storm. We had faced our fears and the doubts, both about ourselves and each other, and had come out stronger for it. The road hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Because now, I understood something that I hadn't before. Real love wasn't about perfection. It was about growth. About standing by each other, not because you have to, but because you choose to. That weekend marked a turning point. Not just for our relationship, but for me, as a person. I had found the strength to evolve, not because someone else needed me to, but because I needed it for myself. And in doing so, I had rediscovered the man I had forgotten. The man who was capable of loving fully, of living authentically, and of embracing the messy, beautiful journey of life. Alyssa and I didn't have all the answers, but we had each other, and that was enough. It always had been. As the sun dipped below the mountains, I realized something I had never truly understood before. Change wasn't something to be afraid of. It was something to embrace. And I was finally ready to embrace it. Not just for Alyssa, not just for anyone else, but for me. Together, we would walk forward, hand in hand, not looking for perfection, but for a future built on love, trust, and the courage to keep growing.